Fabulous. Okay, so welcome to our procrastination workshop. My name is Ruth, and I'm a learning services coordinator at the Student Learning Commons. And this is Maisie. You probably know her.
I'm the academic advisor here at Sci-Space.
And
we're here to facilitate.
We were just saying this is a topic that we both know personally, and we both have, pretty strong feelings about it. So I hope you can, catch the passion. And definitely want to acknowledge that we are here on unceded and ancestral Coast Salish land. At the Burnaby campus, it's the home of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Coquitlam peoples. Okay, so these are, some things that can happen when you procrastinate. So if you wanted to look down the list and see if there's any that you identify with, personally, I'm identifying with that looming anxiety dread, and it gets kind of worse and worse and worse as the procrastination continues. Not a nice feeling at all.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, and also sometimes fatigue, which can also be a bit of an excuse to procrastinate. It's like, can't do the work now, I'm too tired, but really it's the anxiety that's making me tired.
Does anyone want to share if they exhibit any of these or a different type of symptom of procrastination? Anyone?
I mean, these are, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so when I procrastinate, I find myself just scrolling on YouTube and watching a bunch of stuff just to avoid what I'm doing and stuff.
Oh, avoidance. We'll get to the other in a couple slides. We'll talk about the distractions of procrastination.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of these are kind of negative outcomes, especially downward spiral of grades, depression, so why do we do it? If it's so negative, right? I mean, that's kind of a big question. And, more than 90% of the population procrastinates, not more than 90% of the population gets bad grades, so a lot of it is about, to what extent it goes. I was always somebody that I could pull myself back and still have enough time to do a decent job on it. But there were still emotional consequences of being really stressed out when I could have done it at a slower pace. But, sometimes people will procrastinate to the extent that, they have an hour to do something that is 10 hours worth of work. And, sometimes they don't even end up being able to submit something. Okay. So there's a couple of myths about procrastination, and one is that it's a time management problem. If I only got more organized, if I only got more disciplined, if I could only follow my schedule. And connected with that is a bit of a myth that it's laziness. I've seen a lot of students label themselves as lazy, and then I'm like, well, what else are you doing? And they're taking 5 classes, they are, attending their classes, they are working a job, maybe volunteering. They're not lazy people, right? It's a very different sort of thing. And if you're labeling yourself as lazy, then that's fueling the negative emotions that in turn fuel procrastination. So really, it's an emotional regulation problem. It's about negative emotions like anxiety, like guilt, getting out of hand and spilling over into how you use your time.
Why do we procrastinate?
$1 billion question.
Yeah, earlier was mentioned scrolling, right? Is that the reward? Oh no, it's the next one. Whoops.
Well, sometimes it's the distractions.
Distraction.
Sometimes it's like, oh, this YouTube is looking kind of a lot more attractive. But, a lot of the time it's these negative emotions. It's like, I don't know if I can do a good job on this. This is really hard. It's going to take me so long. It's going to be so boring. Feeling overwhelmed, not knowing where to start. I think this is a perfect time of the term for people to feel like, what assignment do I even start with? Fear of failure, so maybe studying for a test, like this is a bit of a phenomenon where I'm not confident about how I'm gonna do on my midterm. And so like, even though it might not be fully conscious, it's like, I'm not gonna study because then if I don't do well on my midterm, it doesn't mean I'm stupid, it just means I didn't study. So I think people are worried that like if they put everything they have into doing well on something and then they don't do well, then, it's going to be bad for their self-esteem. Fear of the unknown. Sometimes people have very good work habits up until they get to the end of something, and then you see fourth year students who are like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I graduate, and suddenly they start procrastinating more. And then perfectionism is very highly related. And it kind of goes along with the anxiety about not being able to do as well as you expect. But in that case, your expectations are like up here. So it almost doesn't matter what the project is, you're not going to do as well as you expect. So the procrastination kicks in. And another way that perfectionism leads to procrastination is, say you have two assignments, one of them you're super confident about, and the other one you're not. Often you will like work endlessly polishing up the project that you're confident about, when you're already at the A+ level, but you're doing more and more and more and more on it. And it's a way of putting off the one that you're not confident about. And then, just not being motivated. And in this case, procrastination is maybe actually telling you a message that you need to hear. So it's like, I don't really want to be doing this. It's my parents who want me in university, but a lot of the time you've internalized it. So I did that kind of procrastination when I was doing my master's degree here in the Faculty of Education. And it was in counseling psychology. And there was like, you could do an MA where you had to write a thesis. That's what I was originally enrolled in. And I just kept putting the thesis off, but I was excelling in all other aspects of the program, like the courses, the practicum. And, eventually after a lot of pain, what it told me was like, I need to switch into the MEd program where you don't have to do a thesis. So useful information. I think you have a similar story, maybe? Yeah, you?
I just had a question.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, why do people generally like develop or have that fear?
This year?
Yeah, like of either failing or the unknown. Like, I guess it might be different or dependent on people's scenarios. and
Right.
cases.
Yeah, I
But
don't
what
think
would be,
there's.
like,
So
I
for
don't know,
me,
I'm just
I
curious.
have perfectionism paralysis. So my expectations of myself are so high that I would rather fail at something because I know like, well, I didn't put any effort into it. So like that failure and perfectionism sort of go hand in hand. But some people have different like like intrinsic motivators or demotivators, I should say. So it really depends on your upbringing, who you are, a lot of nature and nurture, I think.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, like now they're showing like a biological basis in things like anxiety disorder.
Right.
And it is like highly genetic. But also like internalizing pressures from, maybe your parents are pressuring you to do, always be the best. Maybe it's like your peers, right? Like a lot of your peers are you see them really striving and you're like, oh, how come they're doing better than me? I mean, comparison can
Comparison
feel like
trap
that too.
is
Yeah.
very toxic.
Yeah.
Also reframing motivators. So like, say if you're taking a course that you absolutely hate, like physics, and you're in life sciences, I'm getting some smirks. Basically, if you reframe like thinking like, okay, even though I don't like physics, but I do need this to graduate, I do need this to stay in my program, then sometimes a reframe in that will help, align you. Because if you think like, I still enjoy my life science major, I just don't like physics or calculus, then as long as you know that, okay, once I do this course, that I can forget about everything else and just move on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's true. Like in my case, I had the option of switching to a different program where I could just not do the thing I'm procrastinating, but sometimes you don't have the option. And that's where a lot of those strategies will come in. Yeah, and just, feeling low energy. And like I said, sometimes it goes along, like the anxiety or the depression kind of will produce the low energy. But, if you're getting good night's sleeps and there's, no kind of psychological reason that you can pinpoint, maybe you should go and get a blood test or something too, because sometimes it's physical things.
Check your iron levels.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a couple of cycles associated with procrastination. And this is the first. This is like, why do we keep doing it when we know it's going to produce like depression and all that stuff? So it's the temporary sense of relief that you feel when you first put something off. It's like, oh, I thought I was going to work all day on my math, and that's like a gross thought, but luckily somebody phoned and now I'm going out and I feel so relieved, right? And that's like a self-reinforcing thing because, we are motivated by reward. It's like the whole, cognitive behavioral system. And so we felt that relief. And then the next time when you're facing a day of math ahead of you, maybe you want to feel that relief again, right? So it's kind of a loop that repeats. So one thing is before the cycle starts to build up, before the anxiety and all that kicks in or kicks in too much, it helps to really intercept it. So when you're assigned a project, for example, usually there's not a huge amount of anxiety. When you're sitting in class and you're hearing about it, and it's like a month off or something, it's like, yeah, okay, But what can happen is like maybe very rationally, you put it away for a month because you have other things that have like sooner deadlines or whatever. And the more, the longer an assignment or something is put away, it becomes like a ticking time bomb. Tick, 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 where the anxiety is ticking up the entire time. So if you pull something out and it's like a few days before, you might look at it and all of a sudden it's super overwhelming, where like the last time you heard about it, it really wasn't that overwhelming. So the recommendation is when you first get a project, ideally on the same day, at least take a look at it, at least spend some time planning out like the work, the different steps of the work, assessing its level of difficulty, maybe choosing a topic or provisionally choosing a topic that you're going to initially research to see if there's, stuff there. And kind of at least sort of get a sense of it, even if after that you put it away for a while. Because like if you pull it out and you're like, oh yeah, this is very doable. I have this project, this topic, I already know a bit about it. I know where I can look. Then if you put it away for a couple of weeks and you pull it out, it might not be particularly anxiety provoking. But like worst case scenario, you work on it for 15 minutes on the first day and you're like, whoa, this is crazy hard. Maybe it's crazy hard because you haven't learned the material yet that you need for the project, in which case, okay, hold off. But if you sort of are supposed to be equipped to start it right away and you don't feel equipped, right away that you can go for help. And that's something that people often hesitate to do, but it's one of the best procrastination management strategies is getting some help. Especially like if you're a perfectionist, like feeling like you're not going to do well is what triggers it. So if you get help early, then maybe you'll get past that feeling that you're not going to do well. And if you get help early, like the TA is likely to be more available than they will be like a couple of days before the deadline. You could maybe like get enough information that you could start, and then like you have a lot of time to go back at different stages. So there's a lot of benefit to this.
And I also want to say it's okay to ask for help. As a perfectionist, sometimes you want to do everything yourself. But it's okay to ask for help. And the fact that you're here at this workshop is a great first step.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
the strong students that ask for help. And if it's, really difficult for you, one thing you could do is maybe bring along a classmate or something. So it's not just you. Okay, along the similar lines, and this can apply to like if you're having trouble getting started on a particular project, or if you're having trouble getting started on a particular study block that you're planning. Maybe just like reduce the time to a really small manageable time. So the example of like, oh, I was planning to do my math assignment today and it might take a number of hours. A number of hours isn't necessarily a good study block because it's going to fuel procrastination right from the get-go. It's kind of overwhelming to think I have 6 hours, nothing to do but math. So, maybe like shorter study periods of maybe 2 hours at the most each with a break in between, much better. But, even that, you might be like, I've got a 2-hour study block planned. Let me just watch YouTube first, and it's like, yeah, maybe you won't get back to it. So maybe flip it. And instead of saying, I'm going to spend 5 minutes on YouTube first, say, okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes on the project first. Because 5 minutes, like that's not going to make anybody freak out, really. It's very minimal. And set your timer for 5 minutes and work, and often it'll be enough to get you into it. You'll realize it's not that bad, or maybe you're reading something and you want to read it to the end, or whatever, and you'll kind of get on a roll. If you don't get on a roll after 5 minutes, then set a timer for a 5-minute break. Maybe watch that YouTube video, but when the timer goes off, go back, even if you're just going back for another 5 minutes. So after a few of those, you'd probably get into it, even if you don't, even if you do 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, repeatedly, you'll probably get somewhere, like more than you would get if you just didn't use that technique. All right, the other procrastination cycle. This one is definitely good news and bad news. So it tends to be that you become aware of a task to work on, so we'll use that example again. It's, Saturday, I was going to work on my math on the Saturday. And then the next few steps might happen consciously or even below your conscious awareness, really. But something in your brain is telling you, oh, this is gross. I don't want to do it. Like the math is too hard. It's too much. It'll take too long. I'm going to fail the test anyhow. So you've got all these cognitive messages coming at you that are fueling the anxiety, right? So the next step is the distress. The anxiety comes up. And it might, be psychological, where you're like, oh my God, I'm going to fail, and kind of a panic. Or it might be so below your awareness, but all of a sudden your heart is pounding, you're feeling really tired, maybe you're feeling sick to your stomach, you have a headache, something like that can be a sign of anxiety as well. And so then you make an excuse, which, you're probably not conscious that it's an excuse. And just saying, okay, well, I'll take a nap because I'm too tired. I'll study when I get up, which sort of sounds rational, but not really, or maybe this is when you say, okay, I'm just going to watch that YouTube video for a few minutes and but the thing is that like the next thing you do usually is you do that, the thing that you said you're going to do in your excuse. You feel a bit relieved, which is what reinforces the cycle we talked about. But the thing is, then eventually the task still comes up, so maybe the next day you're like, okay, well, I didn't do it Saturday, so Sunday I'm going to work on the math. And it's worse. Like it's worse every time because you're closer and closer to the deadline. You feel guiltier and guiltier about procrastinating the last time. And it can become like a real spiral where maybe you don't even get it done at all. But the good news is you can intervene in any of those places. So we've talked about these things that can happen unconsciously. Really try to zero in on your awareness of them, like try to, if you sort of jump to, okay, I'm going to take a nap, maybe go back and be like, okay, what are my thoughts? Like what's fueling my desire to take a nap? Did I get a good night's sleep or is it maybe something else? So you can intervene at different stages. If you can kind of identify like what you were thinking that's too hard, that you're going to fail, what can you do to intervene at that stage? Does anyone have a suggestion? You have a suggestion, Maisie?
So, I like to intervene well, if it's something like, I like to have a tidy workspace before I study. Maybe spend, earlier that day clearing out your desk at home so that you're set up for success when you study. So similar to, New Year's resolution for working out, maybe it's putting your workout, gear out with your clothes and your gym shoes so that it's ready to go and then you have less of an excuse. It's that activation energy.
So I'd say that's probably the excuse days
Excuse, yeah,
that you would
yeah.
intervene, because like you can't make cleaning up an excuse, because that's
Yeah.
like sometimes people clean up for hours, right?
Hours, yeah.
Yeah, but for the appraisal stage,
Oh.
like, you know, it happens cognitively, and so there's kind of cognitive therapy you can do on yourself, which is challenging some of the thoughts. So if your thought is, I'm going to fail, it doesn't matter how hard I work, you know, you can say, well, have I received failing grades in similar courses before? Maybe you haven't, right?
And reframing, yeah.
Yeah, or you know, did I ever feel like this before where I thought I was gonna fail something? Did I fail? You know, that kind of thing, or just telling yourself that even if I fail, like I will fail by less if I put in the work, you know, or something like that. The distress stage. You can intervene at the distress stage. So you're thinking of the physical symptoms, the emotional symptoms. That is where things like mindfulness come in, meditation, taking, you know, deep calming breaths. I know Maisie is always telling me and telling students that if you breathe in and then you breathe out for a longer period of time, it calms the autonomic nervous system and a lot of these physical symptoms.
And we'll get more into that later in this.
And for some people, you know, it has to do with like exercise, but it's not an excuse to go to the gym for 2 hours. I mean, maybe what you want to do is like some jumping jacks or do like a few minutes of yoga or like run around the block or something.
Or walk around the AQ.
Yeah, get a breath of fresh air, something like that. And yeah, and when the excuses come up, you can, you know, like be prepared in advance so you don't make the excuses. But also that might be where the 5-minute rule comes in, you know? Yeah, so really at any stage of the cycle, and there's so many other ways that you could intervene as well.
Like
It's
if
just-
it's napping too, I want to point out sometimes it's your environment. If you're at home and your bed is right there, it's really enticing. Maybe don't study in your room.
Yeah, very true, very true. Like if you go out, like say you go to your parents' office or something, you sit down at a desk, it's a lot harder to nap. Yeah, okay. So we're gonna do like a quick little activity, because breaking things down small is a really good way of, you know, making it less overwhelming and being able to handle it. So we already talked about the 5-minute rule, that's breaking the time down small, but also breaking the task down small. There's an assignment calculator on the library website, which will break down the steps of a research paper from beginning to end. That's one way to approach it, is by breaking down a task from beginning to end. But sometimes that's also an invitation to spend a lot of time procrastinating on doing that. Or when you see what the task is like from beginning to end, it itself can be overwhelming. So let's do this a little bit differently. Because really all you need is one step. So get something to write with.
Or your phone. Does
Yeah,
anyone need pens?
yeah, I mean, when I say write, I could be digital completely. Yeah, and you know, just think about one task that you've been procrastinating. And don't break down what's remaining of the task, but think of at least one next step, up to maybe 3. Each next step should take no more than a couple of hours. Maybe it only takes a few minutes. Okay. So a manageable next step that makes sense to do next, and you're willing to do it because it's not too hard for you. And then once you have that next step, that's all you need. I mean, maybe you're gonna come up with a few, but if you have even one, then you can either do it right away, or you can write it into your scheduling system. You can plan out a time that you're going to do it. Is there anyone here who does not have a scheduling system? Actually, does everyone have a scheduling system?
Online or offline?
Okay, yeah, because I mean, even though time management, like it's not a time management problem, procrastinating, but sometimes time management can kind of be part of the more Band-Aid kind of solution. And it really helps to have a scheduling system. Yeah, so basically you identify a next step, can't be more than a couple of hours. If it seems too big, break it down further. And then you schedule it or you do it. And yeah, in terms of how small is too small, no step is too small. So Tim Pitchell is the expert on that early slide who said that it's not a time management problem. He's a really big expert on managing procrastination. And I heard him interviewed, and he said that one thing he procrastinates on is writing a letter of reference for students. He doesn't like writing letters of reference. So his first step is just like rereading, because usually it comes in an email. So he'll reread the email. That probably takes like 2 minutes. And that's his first step, but it gets him going. Next step is just to like open the document that he's going to write the letter of reference on. You know, so you're doing like really minuscule small things, but they're wins and they snowball, just like the negative feelings when you procrastinate snowballs. Doing these tiny things snowballs, and eventually it prepares you to do a bigger step. Okay, so you always have one step. You know, once you have done that step, then you don't stop until you have identified another next step. Okay, that's the key to this method. And then you either do that other next step right away, or you schedule that other next step. And so say you've scheduled it for like the next day, then the next day comes, you do that other next step, you identify a third next step, and you schedule it or you do it. So you just kind of keep the ball rolling. And so like you're never really thinking about the entire project. I mean, you could think about the entire project, you know, like I said before, but if it's just going to make you anxious, you're just sort of thinking, okay, how can I start? Right? So you just keep starting. And every time you start, you're closer to completion. So you can complete a project in a series of starts, and it can be not as anxiety provoking. Plus, when you think about breaking down a project, sometimes it's overwhelming because you think, well, I have so much to do. I can't spend an hour breaking it down into parts. But if you do it this way with just like one step or two at a time, it can just take a minute or two.
And I just want to bring up the weekly calendar thing. If you haven't started a weekly calendar, there will be a schedule building workshop in May with Ruth and Carmen. So to start off your summer term fresh. So feel free to do that.
Yeah, and that one is really a hands-on workshop. So like we provide you with maybe 10 minutes worth of information. We get you building your schedule, and we come around and just offer assistance when you did.
So now that Ruth went over the what is procrastination and how to overcome some of the procrastination, we are going to talk about the where and when to do your tasks so that you can find an optimal time of day or during the week to do so. So everyone is different. Everyone doesn't. People function differently. People have different interests. So recognize that. So while we're giving tips and tricks, some things may work for you and some things might not, or you might want to combine things together to make it better suited for you. So we're going to talk about how to identify the time of day when you have the highest energy to actually sit down and perform well. And then also we're going to talk about how to find what's been your distractions. Okay, and then where is the best place for you to study? So how do you do that? You're going to keep a journal. So basically you're going to audit your behaviors. And yeah, so a journal can be really simple line entries, or on a spreadsheet if you're really organized and color coded with different colors meaning different things. Make it work for you, but basically you want to keep track for 1 to 3 days to really see what's the best schedule for yourself. So if you start on a task, record it and when you started it, and then you're going to note whenever you have a distraction. You're also going to note what your energy level is for that period of time. And then basically you're going to do this for different periods of the day and throughout the week. And then you're going to step back and you're going to notice patterns. You're going to be more aware of who you are as a person, and be able to assess and reorganize yourself. So you might think like, I'm a night owl. I love staying up. But are you staying up and actually being productive? Or are you staying up and like literally doing mind-numbing things where it requires very minimal brain activity, like scrolling, or binge watching shows? So one thing you might notice is like, oh, I tried to start on my chem lab report after lunch, but my energy levels were really low. I was crashing. Why is that? Maybe what you ate for lunch was really heavy. All the blood rushes from your brain to your digestive system. So because it's pulling all that blood away, you might be really lethargic. So something to mitigate that is, instead of starting to study or do a lab report at 1 p.m., you might want to shift it to 2 p.m. So after you've had some time to digest, maybe do a quick 15-minute workout and then get to tackling what you need to tackle. Sometimes it's the environment, like if you notice or you heard it's best to study in a quiet environment, you might want to be on the 6th floor of the library because you heard it's the quietest spot. But then you realize you're just hearing the constant ticking of the clocks and every minuscule, like the humming of the lights, and it's too much, it's driving you insane. So you might prefer to study in a more ambient environment at a cafe or like Sci-Space where you know other people are studying with you. So it's more of a accountability thing. Like, oh, if someone's working here beside me, I'm going to work too. Sometimes it's knowing your study groups. If you're with a very social bunch, you might want to ditch them and find another group to study with. But basically you want to do legends, do symbols with what works for you and how you like to report things. But it's all about noticing and when to intercept, just like that procrastination cycle of when to intervene and find a new path for yourself.
I have a couple of points here. One is you're all here at Sci-Space, so I'm making the assumption, it could be wrong, that a lot of you find this is an effective environment for you to study. But what about on days, like if you live far away from campus, what do you do on days when it doesn't make sense for you to commute up to here, use Sci-Space? And I've certainly met a lot of students who are very effective when they're on campus. And then on days when they don't have to come to campus, you know, they plan to work at home and they really don't get much done. So in that case, you know, find a similar environment. Like once you figured out what kind of environment works for you, because you have one of those environments, try to find other environments that are similar wherever you happen to, you know, spend your time. So maybe like one environment or two at school, because I mean, it's possible that you want to study at Sci-Space and there's an event happening. So find a couple when you're on campus, maybe find one closer to home, like maybe a public library or a cafe, or, you know, maybe another school, right? They won't know you're not a student, you know, something like that closer to home. Maybe, you know, if you spend a lot of time on your job and sometimes you want to study after that, find a place closer to your job that's a similar characteristic as well. The other thing I want to mention from what Maisie's saying is, like with her description here, you're keeping track, you're kind of analyzing what's going on for you. So you have this attitude, like a lot of you might be science students, and if you're not, I mean, you're doing some academic work anyhow. And what does academic work take? Curiosity, right? You got a project, you have to kind of investigate it, be curious about it. So you're bringing that same attitude of curiosity to try to troubleshoot your situation. Maybe you've been in the lab troubleshooting experiments, but here you're the experiment. You're troubleshooting your situation. You're curious. And that can really shift an attitude of guilt and shame that fuels procrastination into, this is a problem, just like the problem with the amoebas in the lab. And how can I troubleshoot this problem with an attitude of curiosity? Because there's a way to do that. All right. So I talked about some of these cognitive strategies before. So we want to do a bit of a thought experiment with cognitive strategies, and somebody might want to report back. So right now, ask yourself, was there a time when you didn't procrastinate or you had less of a barrier to focusing? Oh, and side point, some people will say, I'm a procrastinator. Last time I did this workshop, Aiden was here and he's like, I'm a procrastinator, are you? Just like me. And I'm like, no, you're not a procrastinator. Procrastination is a behavior. It's not an identity,
Don't label yourself with that.
Yeah. If you say you're a procrastinator, then that almost is an excuse to just keep procrastinating because that's who you are, right? But it's a behavior. So we can all probably think of a time where we had something that we were working on and we didn't procrastinate. For some people, it might be another academic task. For some people, it might be their job. And it might be, well, that's different. It's because like I have to, and I'm on my job and I'm scheduled for this time. And it's like, it's not that different. Like, what can you take from that? I mean, you've got an element of accountability. You have an element of being scheduled. You have an element of there's not a heck of a lot of other things that you have to do when you're at, that's available to do when you're at your job. So yeah, what was different about the time? And, so the task or situation, okay, well, it was a work setting, but what can you import from that work setting? Or else what did you do? And when the question is, what did you do? It might be like, how were you thinking about it? Yeah, and this gratitude can come in here too, because I see a difference between students who are like, oh yeah, I went to university because it was what everyone does after high school, didn't really think about it. And then students who are grateful, grateful that they live in a society where it's maybe sort of affordable to get an education, where their situation allows it. If they're a woman, they're in a society where women are allowed to be educated, and just feeling gratitude for the opportunity to have education. That can often be very motivating for people.
I can share as well, Ruth.
Thank you.
He said, when I enjoyed the task at hand, or if I had a low level of stress for something pushing me. So that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing on Zoom.
So how can you, so a lot of people will say that, I'll be talking to a student, looking at their transcript and be like, oh, you got a bunch of D's that term, but this class you got a B plus. What was the difference? And you can be like, oh, I enjoyed that class. Okay, well, maybe you don't enjoy every class. You can go back to that example of you're a bio major, you're taking physics, you don't enjoy it. So one thing you could do is tell yourself it's important for your program, but you could also do things to try to increase your level of enjoyment while you're doing the physics work. So can anyone think of something that could increase their level of enjoyment while they're doing the work that they don't inherently enjoy? Yeah.
Changing your focus to focus on the things that are the positives about what you're doing and focusing on that and kind of just ignoring the negatives.
Love it.
Yeah, maybe, because I know my daughter, when she would take courses like that, she'd get very frustrated while she was trying to solve a problem, but she'd absolutely be euphoric once it was solved. So maybe that's an element of joy.
Oh yeah, the wins, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I guess having a reward system, so I don't know, for me, when I have to do courses that I don't enjoy, I have a reward system, so do a physical activity or just food, anything to food, treating yourself to it after getting a really hard question right, or proud of the work that you've done to submit or something like that.
Yeah,
That's great.
like pairing it with something you enjoy. Maybe there's like a cafe, and normally you wouldn't go to it because it's kind of expensive, but maybe like when you're trying to do your really hard work that you don't enjoy, that's when you allow yourself to do it at that cafe. And also like if you're a social person, maybe having a study buddy and like, I mean, as long as it's not someone who's going to be super distracting, but having the motivation that, oh, I can talk about what I'm learning. Now that's more interesting to me than just, sitting there quietly and doing it on my own, and maybe the reward system, like, after we have talked about what we're learning for, a few hours, we can talk about other things. So this is a good thing to think of, just like always thinking about exceptions. If you think you're going to fail, like thinking about exceptions where you thought you would fail and you didn't. But, also thinking about what you did. Maybe a better prompt than that would be like a time where I was going to procrastinate and I somehow didn't. How did I do that? All right. So again, we're talking about time management strategies being probably not a full solution. Like a lot of the time it's, it's learning to manage those emotions. That's the full solution. But Maisie is distributing a handout and I'd like you to think of it as a menu. So you're at a restaurant, you're getting a menu of some really good dishes that you can choose from. In this case, they're time management strategies. And these are all ones that have support, that they work for a lot of people, but not all of them are going to work for you. And because things are so individual, like Maisie was saying before, what I would suggest you do with this is go and, identify, like maybe with a pencil or something. And, and if you're online, then you just got a link to a webpage. Try to identify ones that you would like to try at some point. And, maybe there's like 10 of them that you want to try at some point, but don't be a perfectionist about trying everything all at once. Cause sometimes you put pressure on yourself to do too much all at once. It just fuels the guilt. It's hard, hard to do everything all at once. So once you said, okay, at some point I want to do these 10, choose one, choose one that you're actually going to do between now and next Wednesday. You've got to give yourself a week to experiment with it as a way to better manage your time. And, just maybe have some way of holding yourself accountable, or if you're with a friend here, well, let each other know so they can hold you accountable. And then next Wednesday, sort of check in with yourself and like, did this help? Do I want to keep this strategy? Is there a way I want to modify it a little bit and keep it? Or am I going to discard it? And whatever you decide to do with that strategy, you can try another one, so I'd say just build them in like one at a time. And some of them are more, inherently psychological, and some of them are more just kind of about organization, but either way, they might help.
And just like a science experiment, you're not going to throw all different variables in the pot at the same time. You're going to choose one variable, just to echo what Ruth said, and test at once, one at a time, to see the effectiveness.
It's kind of like also, breaking down a large task into small steps as well, because you're trying to set yourself up for success, and have like, okay, there's one that I tried and it succeeded, so it's going to snowball, as opposed to I'm going to try them all and set myself up for failure. Okay, there's just some additional strategies we haven't mentioned. Accountability. I guess we mentioned that one like a little bit, but I mean, study partner can increase your enjoyment, but it can also just increase your accountability. Because if you're studying with your sister, who is like always super focused and motivated, you don't want to throw her off. Or, say you really do feel like you study alone better. maybe just having someone to check in with. Like if you're trying to kick the procrastination habit, you have another friend who's, said they're trying to spend more time on school this term or something like that, you can partner up and just send each other messages like, okay, this afternoon I want to do 3 of my physics questions, check with me at 4 o'clock if I've done that, and just sort of have this mutual check-in remote kind of system going.
And some of these additional strategies we actually covered last week at the Level Up Your Study Skills. So if you weren't able to attend that workshop, we have a recording of on the SLC website now, so you can check that out.
Okay. Use your distractions as rewards. That's kind of like the 5-minute rule. It's kind of like, no, I'm not going to watch the YouTube video now. But when I'm done, I will watch the YouTube video. Or it could even be, I'm going to be doing a lot of work today. I'm going to have like a bunch of different study blocks. And tonight I'm going to a concert. So I have something to look forward to, and you probably have tickets for the concert. So you're going either way, whether you do work or not. Sometimes contingent rewards are good, but sometimes just having something to look forward to, whether you do it or not, can help you get the work done. Here, expectations. This is another way you can use the kind of journaling method. So remember the negative thoughts that kind of trigger the procrastination cycle when you're aware of the task. It's going to be really horrible to do. It's going to take too long, blah, blah, blah. If you're always having thoughts like that, you can just sort of start keeping a record of them. So you're starting like, okay, I'm going to do my physics assignment, 3 questions. How long do I think it's going to take? I think it's going to take 6 hours. It's like, and that's making me feel sick. And how horrible do I think it's going to be? I think it's going to be on a scale from 10, it'll be like an 8 in horribleness. So you write down 6 hours and an 8. So then you complete the 3 physics problems, maybe in that study session, or maybe, in a subsequent study session. And you keep track of how long it actually did take. How long did it take? Oh, 4.5 hours. And how horrible was it? Well, I wasn't really enjoying it, but I'd say it was a 6, so if you have like running records of your horrible expectations versus the realities, or you could do it with marks too. Like I think I'm going to fail. Oh, I got a C, then it really helps you later on if you're trying to challenge the negative thoughts and expectations. If you can look back at this record of, oh yeah, I usually was wrong about how horrible things would be. Learning to say no. I like that meme there, right? So sometimes, you'll have every intention of doing the work. And then a friend will ask you to do something instead, or a boss will call you into work or something. And for whatever reason, you feel you have to FOMO, you're worried about, the boss is not going to think you're a team player or whatever. You say yes, and then, you lose the time. So, or maybe it's like you're looking for an excuse and you jump on like the least invitation or whatever that you get to do something else. But either way, learning to say no is really important because you're valuing your own priorities. And, you're setting boundaries, and sometimes you have to say no in advance, like telling your friends, it's my exam period. Please don't invite me out, for the next 2 weeks. And after that, let's get together for a huge celebration, Yeah, and then, trying to be realistic, like looking at your deadline and, okay, well, how far in advance do I have to start? So kind of maybe writing some interim steps. By this date, I want to have this done.
And you can give yourself fake deadlines. So if you know that, say, tax season is coming up and it's due April 30th.
She's saying that because that's what I procrastinate on. She knows that.
So basically, you might want to set yourself a fake deadline of a week before. So I'm giving tax season, but like honestly, if you have a midterm coming up, maybe you want to study before so you can give yourself time to give yourself a mock exam with a practice exam that's on a website or to hand in your paper to a peer, like the writing consultants over at SLC, to give yourself that sort of buffer, and then that way you can get, make adjustments from there.
Good idea. Oh, yeah, and then prioritization, you know, so maybe not focusing on like the 5 things that you still need to get done in the term, you know, just focusing on one of them and maybe even just like a little part of one of them. And this last part is so crucial, right? Because remember, procrastination is fueled by negative emotions like guilt and anxiety. So Tim Pitchell, that big expert that I keep talking about, he did a study where he, you know, kind of, I guess, gauged people's feelings after they procrastinated and then followed their subsequent behavior. And the people that really felt guilty about procrastinating were more prone to keep procrastinating. You know, the people that were like, I screwed up that time, but you know I can do better. I know I'm going to get to it tomorrow or whatever. They were more likely to not procrastinate. So like self-compassion is like a huge part of it. And they actually have a recording on the HCS website of a script for self-compassion meditation. You know, so it's very important to forgive yourself. Like if you had a best friend and they were like, I was going to spend yesterday working on my physics assignment and I procrastinated and I hate myself and I'm the worst. I mean, you'd be like, no, you're not the worst. Everybody does it. It's normal, right? So why not treat yourself with that same compassion?
So basically, once you feel that cycle happening to you at different stages, you might identify it earlier and earlier as you get more attuned with who you are as an adult. Basically, remember to acknowledge how you're feeling. It's okay. We want to validate our feelings. We don't want to bury them and push it aside. Everyone feels this way and it's only temporary. So acknowledge how you feel and accept it. And then once again, take a deep breath. It's important to pause and ground yourself. And as Ruth mentioned, if you activate your if you're on running on the fight, flight, or fright sympathetic nervous system, basically you're on edge, you're anxious, you're triggered. How do we reverse that? By activating your parasympathetic nervous system, by taking longer exhales than your inhales. So if you forget, just repeat the words relax, where re is your inhale and lax is your exhale. And automatically that lax symbol is a longer stress syllable than re. So relax. And then hopefully that would help reset some of your that procrastination cycle. And then return to your task and repeat as you find it coming up, those feelings coming up again. So you'll notice it earlier and earlier as we go along. And we'll touch base more on this with the exam anxiety workshop coming up on Friday.
Friday, same time, same place, 11:30. Yeah, I mean, one thing I also wanted to say is that like this relax, that is kind of a new piece for me. And another new piece happened over the Christmas holidays. I actually had a financial task, my most anxious, procrastinating kind of task that I had to do. And my daughter had just come through the crunch time at school, and you know, and she just happened to sort of stray mention we can do hard things. So when I was working on the financial task and I was like starting to panic, not only would I be pausing, acknowledging, breathing, but I would just be repeating in my head, we can do hard things, you know,
I love
and that
that
kind of
mantra.
kept me going.
A simple mantra like that is very powerful.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we're available for questions, but there's like right now, there's just some wind up material. So this is the Student Learning Commons website. That's where I work. We are available at all 3 branches of the library, and here it's like the back of the main floor of the library by the computers is where we're available. And like Maisie said, we could help you with writing feedback. Yeah, and you can like book a consultation for your writing. Consultations are free. They can happen really at any time of the week, like evenings, weekends, even when our office is closed, because they can also be virtual. So check that out as you work on final drafts of your papers and your lab reports. We do have science students who work with us, Anushka and Sophia, if you want somebody who's particularly familiar with that work. And I believe that QR code goes to our resources about lab reports. Yeah, and then under the green, orange, and blue, as Maisie was indicating, there's just a lot of self-help resources. Including we have this resource on procrastination
So we'll hand that
that Maisie's gonna hand it out, but it's also under the learning and studying, and like there's a lot more information about procrastination and perfectionism and anxiety that live under the orange tab.
And we are here at Sci-Space. Thanks again for coming. You can access academic advising with me. I'll be here until April 30th. Carmen Ho at the back, thank you for moderating the chat. She can help with talking about engagement opportunities here on campus with your student unions or clubs. And then Aiden Wiki, who helps coordinate all these academic success workshops like the ones with SLC. So feel free to come chat with us.
You can, you are gonna get these slides if Neela has your email address. So if you're not registered, give your email address. And if you wanted to scan this QR code, you can get co-curricular record credit for attending this workshop, just a record. And, maybe at some point in the future where you're applying for jobs, you might want to peruse your co-curricular record and see, what skills can I talk about? Oh, I learned how to manage procrastination. I learned some emotional management here.
It's like a transcript for your extracurriculars here at SFU.
Yeah, so there's 2 more workshops coming up in this series. That's one we were talking about that we're doing. It's the Ruth and Maisie show again, the Maisie and Ruth
It'll be
show
my last
on
workshop
Friday.
this year.
Yeah. And then on April 7th, I'm working with Professor Sarah Johnson, who actually knows a lot about quantitative strategies. Unlike me, I know a little, and we're going to be doing a workshop about quantitative exams on April 7th.
And of course, I didn't mean to throw physics under the bus as an example, this workshop, but it was a quick go-to. And if anyone missed last Friday's workshop on Level Up Your Study Skills, once again, it is on the SLC workshop now.
I'll show you where, yeah. So you go to find a workshop, which might be where some of you went to sign up for this. And there actually is a link at the very bottom of the page to workshop recordings.